Hi and welcome to Cowgirl Yarn. My name's Maureen and today we are tackling the next part in the Johanna vest knit along. We've taken a little bit of a hiatus, but that's okay because there was a lot of knitting to do in between our last step and the next step. So today we are going to tackle the separation of the fronts and start working on the fronts individually and shape for the armholes. So you'll want to make sure that you've measured your Johanna vest, make sure it's as long as you'd like it to be, have your main color yarn ready, and have something to put stitches onto. So you can have waste yarn. The pattern suggests dental floss. You'll need a tapestry needle and some yarn if you're going to do it that way. If you want to do it my way, I have two smaller circular needles that I'll be placing my fronts on, and I'll leave my back on the long needle. So far in our vest, we have joined our three original pieces, fronts to back, knit them all together, added pockets, and we've knit for a very long time on a lot of stitches to get the length that we're after. So once we've reached our desired length, this is going to be your armpit beginning. So if you want to measure, hold this up to your armpit and make sure you like the length of your vest overall. This is the time to do it. Once you've decided that the length is okay for your vest, it's time to start the armhole shaping. So that's what we're here for today. So we are going to take this long swath of stitches and we're going to break it up into our two fronts and a back piece. So let's go ahead and look at our pattern before we begin. So we should be on a right side row. We're going to slip one stitch knitwise, knit to 10 stitches before first stitch marker, bind off 20 stitches removing stitch marker, knit to 10 stitches before second stitch marker, bind off 20 stitches removing stitch marker, knit to last stitch, slip last stitch knitwise. So essentially what we're doing is we're binding off for the armpits, and it's going to separate our three pieces out, and we're going to do this according to our stitch markers. So you can see this is where I've got my stitch markers. These are my side seam markers, and I've attached cute little cowgirl yarn markers to them so it's easier to see. But they are both 42 stitches in on either side, so I have my fronts and my back. So these are the fronts, this is the back, and we are going to dive into the separation row. So we are going to take a look at it again. We're going to slip the first stitch knitwise as we have been doing the entire time, and treat it just like the edges have been treated. So now we're going to knit to 10 stitches before the first marker. Okay, we are at 10 before our marker. Now the pattern says we are going to bind off 20 stitches, removing our stitch marker. So we're just going to knit our 2 to start the bind off, and lift over, just a regular bind off, knit another stitch, bind off, okay, first 10 stitches are bound off. I'm going to take my stitch marker out and we're going to bind off 10 more. Okay, now we've got a nice big gap right there. It's exactly what you want because that's where your armpit's going to be. And then this is a front that has just been separated. Our next move is to knit to 10 stitches before the remaining marker, and then we're going to bind off 20 again. Okay, we've made it to the other side, so we're going to bind off 20 over here. We're going to do the first 10 and move our stitch marker and then do another 10. And then we have our gap again. Okay, so then we're just going to knit to the end. And I'm just going to count just to double check that I did this correctly, which is always a good choice. Okay, so now we have two sizable gaps in our long stitches. So now we need to isolate what we're going to work on. But first, this pattern recommends threading dental floss or a similar contrasting color thread through all stitches in each of the 3 separate sections to mark the beginning of upper body shaping. If you'd like to do that, go ahead and do it. I won't demo it because I don't know if it's totally necessary. But if you do want to keep track of what you're doing, you can use these clippy style markers and just kind of clip them at the edge of your shaping. Because that way you do know where it begins, but without any extraneous slipping or adding extra thread in, which I think at this point with this giant gap here, we are going to be able to see where our shaping begins, even as we complete more rows. So I would just throw in a couple of removable stitch markers at the point where we're about to begin shaping, just for safety. If you really love visual reminders of where you've come from, like by all means, thread some contrasting thread through your stitches. This step that they're talking about does not take them off the needle. So that's another reason why I like the removable stitch markers. They're asking you to thread a thin piece through these stitches while leaving them live on the needle, which I'm not sure is totally necessary in this pattern. So I'm just going to throw in some locking stitch markers just so that I know where the beginning of my shaping begins. And we're doing this before I separate the 3 pieces onto different needles or holders so that I know where it starts. Okay? So now we're going to split and isolate our 3 pieces of the vest because we can only work on one piece at a time here. So if we look at our pattern, it says transfer the right front shoulder stitches and back shoulder stitches to separate stitch holders or to separate pieces of contrasting color waste yarn. So that's these guys. We're going to split them all off the same needle so they'll be on their own thing. But what I like to do when something asks me to do this, I use other needles to put my stuff onto because I don't like the idea of putting something on a piece of yarn and then immediately having to stick it on another needle to work it. So what I want to do is move my shoulder stitches onto another needle that's the same gauge I'm using, size 7. So I'm going to move my 32 for my size shoulder stitches onto a workable needle. Now I plan to work on this pretty immediately, so having these needles in here is a really nice thing because it eliminates a movable step. If you aren't planning on working on it immediately, you can use waste yarn, like they say, and move it onto waste yarn instead, or grab a few interchangeable cords, which are a low investment, and stick your stitches onto those interchangeable cords and put caps on the ends of them. They come with the caps. Or if you have extra needles in the same gauge, you can put them on the needle and then use the rubber tips to protect the stitches so they don't fall off. So I'm going to leave my front on this needle right here. And then I'm going to leave my back stitches on this long needle that they're already on because I don't really want to move them if I don't have to. So I'm going to move the rest of these other side shoulder stitches onto another gauge needle. And I'm just flipping it to the back side so that it's more intuitive for slipping. And it's not, oopsies, there's a stitch down. Okay, that places us with 3 separate pieces on 3 separate needles or holders. So we're going to move on to our pattern. So it says left front shoulder armhole shaping. This is nice because our yarn is already attached to the left front shoulder because it's the last end of the row that we did. So we're going to wrong side row, purl all stitches, and then right side row, we're going to start some shaping. So let's purl and then we'll do the right side. Now we are ready for the shaping row of the left front shoulder armhole shaping. So right side row, it says knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit to the last stitch, slip last stitch, knitwise. Repeat these 2 rows 4 times, ending with a right sided row. Okay, so we are going to be decreasing, it says armhole shaping, we're going to be decreasing near the bind off gap because that's where our armhole is. So all of these actions will happen here, near the bind off gap. Okay, because armhole shaping, we don't want it over here because that's our face side. This is our armhole side. So the shaping that we're making is going to make a nice line here to ease the armhole into this straight gap that we've already created. So we're just going to go ahead and do it, and then you'll repeat it 5 times. So you're going to knit 1, slip, slip, and knit those together. That's your decrease to create that nice line. And you're going to knit to the last stitch and slip last stitch knitwise, because we are maintaining that slip stitch edging. We have completed the left front shoulder armhole shaping, and note that it says repeat these 2 rows 4 times, ending with a right side row, 5 stitches decreased. What they really mean is repeat these 2 rows 4 more times, so 5 times total, ending with a right side row, so that you do end up with 5 stitches decreased. So now that that's complete, you can see that it's got a nice little slant compared to our bind off, so it's swelling nice into the armpit here. So now we've got a few stitches left, and we need to do neck hole shaping. So the neck shaping is going to take place on this side of our knitting. So it's going to mirror this shaping that we have done. So if you take a look at your pattern, it says left front shoulder neck shaping, wrong side row, purl all stitches, right side row, knit to last 3 stitches, knit 2 together, slip last stitch knitwise. So that has been consistent, the slip last stitch knitwise. We're going to repeat these 2 rows until however many stitches you need remain. So I'm going to repeat these 2 rows till I have 15 stitches left on my needle. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead. I've already done my purl row. Now I'm going to do the right side neck decrease row so you can see what that looks like. So I'm going to knit over to the last 3 stitches. I have 3 left. I'm going to knit 2 together and slip my last stitch knitwise. So that's my decrease row for the neck shaping. So you can see that it's slanting this direction so that the neck hole is going to have a nice angle to it. But it's also mirroring the armhole shaping over here. So we're going to continue going between purl rows and then neck decrease rows, which happen on this edge, until we have so many stitches we need for our size. In my case, 15 stitches left. And then after that, it says continue in stockinette, and they mean as follows. So wrong side row, still purling all stitches, right side row, knit to the next to last stitch, slip last stitch knitwise. So you'll continue knitting those 2 rows after you get down to your recommended amount of stitches until this piece measures however many inches from your thread line or from where we bound off for our armpit or where you put a stitch marker. So from here up, that'll be the measurement. So we're going to measure this way. And you want to keep doing this stockinette stitch after you complete your neck shaping until you reach this measurement here for your size. So for my size, it's going to be 9 inches from the bind off thread line or stitch marker line. So it says cut your yarn, leave a 24-inch tail, transfer stitches to a stitch holder or to contrasting color waste yarn. So same thing applies. If you want to leave it on the needle with your remaining stitches left, go ahead and do that. If you want to slip it onto some waste yarn, go ahead and do that. But do make sure that you leave that 24-inch tail. That's going to make our lives much easier in the finishing process in the next video. Alright, so that is the left shoulder. So the right shoulder, exactly the same situation. The only thing that changes is you are going to use a knit 2 together in your armhole shaping and then a slip slip knit in your neck shaping. And that just makes sure that you're mirroring the decreases. So that is consistent in the pattern, is you're going to mirror your decreases. If this one's a slip slip knit, this one will be a knit 2 together. Okay. So you're going to keep going. Your right shoulder is exactly the same as your left shoulder. And then we'll talk about back shaping. Back armhole shaping. So nothing major about this other than you're going to be working your armhole shaping on either side of the back at the same time. So it's the exact same techniques as the 2 fronts that you just did, except you're going to be decreasing on either side of the back so that you're bringing in a nice clean line this direction on both sides at the same time. So if you want to take a look at that pattern language so we can make sure that's clear, you're of course going to purl all the stitches on the wrong side, And you're going to knit one, slip, slip, knit to the last 3 stitches, knit 2 together, and knit 1. So you're going to repeat those 2 rows 4 times, ending with a right side row, 10 stitches decreased, which makes sense because on the fronts we decreased 5 on each side, so we would decrease 10 total in our back panel to make it symmetrical. Once we've done our repeats of armhole shaping for the back, we are going to purl all the stitches, continuing in stockinette as writ, and knit all stitches. So we're going to continue purling all stitches, knitting all stitches. Repeat these 2 rows until the back measures however long you need from the thread line, or our stitch markers, or the bind off area. So we're going to end with a wrong side row. And I love it when they give you the amount of stitches you should have. So we should have this many stitches depending on your size. Okay, so my 2 fronts are complete and ready for the next step. My back, I have worked through the decreases of the armhole, and then I've worked even to reach the measurement for my size. Now we need to do a couple other things for the back that we didn't need to do for the fronts. So if you take a look at your pattern, I have done all of this stuff here where it's back armhole shaping, and we've repeated 2 rows of stockinette for however many inches that we need, ending with a wrong side row. So we have this many of stitches. So we have completed the back armhole shaping, and now we're ready for the back neck shaping. We're going to bind off a chunk of stitches in the center of the back stitches to create a nice curve for the opening of the neck. Now we're also going to be slowly binding off more stitches every other row to make a more gradual curve for the neck. So we're going to keep repeating these last 2 rows with wrong side row purl, right side row bind off 2 stitches, knit to the end of the row, until however many stitches remain you need for your size. So first let's do right side row, the first one of the neck shaping. So we're going to knit 36, bind off 8 stitches, and knit to the end of the row. All right, now that we have separated our back into 2 pieces, I'm just going to be working on this part of the back, and when this is done, we'll go back and work on this part. So this is splitting the row, or splitting into 2 pieces. So we'll work just on this portion here for the next part of our instructions. So we're going to turn our work, and we're going to work the wrong side row of neck shaping, which is just purl to bound off stitches. Okay, so I purled and now I turned because I'm at the bound off portion. So now we're going to bind off 2 stitches and then knit to the end of the row. So we're going to bind off 2, there's 1 and 2, and then we're going to knit to the end of the row. All right, so we're going to keep repeating those 2 rows, purl on the wrong side, bind off 2 stitches at the beginning of the next row, and knit across until we're down to however many stitches we need for our size. In my case, it's 15, so I'm going to keep going until this number of stitches equals 15. And then we're going to cut the yarn and transfer all stitches to a stitch holder or waste yarn, whatever works best for you. So we're going to keep trucking until this has gotten down to 15 stitches. Once that's complete, we're going to go ahead and do the exact same stuff to the other side. We'll just reattach our yarn and begin working the exact same decrease style, binding off on this side and just purling on the wrong side. This is our completed back neck shaping. You can see it's a nice, smooth little round area for your neck. It's going to hug the contour of your neck. And then you've got our front shaping all complete here. And that's this week's lesson. So next time we are going to see each other, we're going to join our fronts and our backs at the shoulders, pick up stitches around the neckband, finish our armholes, tie in our ends, and wash and block our vest. So I'll see you guys next time. Happy knitting!